Thanks everybody for this. We have a few questions coming in online. We might also have some questions or discussion points in the room. I would like to invite Dennis, Caroline, and Peter to turn on your cameras so you can kind of be present as the questions come up. So let's start with a few questions online, and then I'll open up and we'll answer those, and then we'll go to the room.
Okay, so Indira Klein has two questions that I'll just combine for the panelists. Would you share thoughts on buy-in at all levels in participation, collection, and sharing of data? To what degree, if any, has there been unforeseen challenges? That may be for Caroline. If you can turn on your camera, again, all panelists, if you're able to turn on your cameras. And then Indra also asked, to what degree are tech tools such as AI translators integrated within the processing of data in these contexts?
All right, can you hear me?
Yes, and did you want to field one of those questions, Caroline? I think the one on buy-in at all levels sounds like it might be good for you to handle.
Yeah, so thanks for the question. I think I spoke to that about the initial mistrust between city departments and communities, where city departments were not clear on the methodologies used by the communities, and the communities themselves are not clear that the data will not be used to harm them. So I think this is a negotiated process. It depends on aligned priorities. So if, for example, the communities, if the cities are addressing a priority area for the community, then the communities are comfortable sharing that information. But then, of course, there are what you call the unintended consequences. And if Nisera was here today, she would talk about evictions that happened during the flooding in Nairobi last year. And this is an unintended consequence. So those are some of the unforeseen challenges, but I think what you're saying is that we really need the NGOs and the researchers to act or provide the platforms for the cities and the communities to communicate more. And if the areas themselves are aligned, if you're addressing priorities that align between the community and the cities, then it becomes easier. But of course, as I've said, it's not without challenges. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. Dennis, did you want to speak to anything that came up in the questions for the online folks before I turn it over to questions in the room?
Perhaps I just speak slightly on the issue of the buy-in. I'd say at the scale that we are working on for producing data that is scalable to global assessment of the slum indicator, we are lucky because we actually have already pushed from the countries themselves to be able to develop these methods. So at least from the national perspective in planning departments as well as them, there's a lot of support. But we're also very much interested in also getting all this information produced at the local level by communities also feeding into these mechanisms. And we, again, it's nice that there's already so many things happening. Some of the projects that have been implemented as part of the mapping efforts actually are already embedding some of the data produced by communities who are increasingly willing and able to contribute to these processes. Of course, the challenge I see from my side is the scalability, because a lot of this effort to produce this and have these multiple levels of engagement, you also need quite a bit of significant resources to be able to carry out effective participation and co-creation. So I see this still as a major challenge, but at least from where I see it, our intention is if the local systems are able to buy the process and uptake the methods directly, then the impact at the local level is them driving the process as opposed to a certain international organization pushing it. Then I think we'll have a lot of impact in the long term.
Great, thank you. I want to give folks in the room an opportunity to raise any points or ask any questions.
So, sorry, Dana, I wanted to...
Oh, sorry, Peter. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut
Yeah.
you. Go ahead.
Yeah,
And then
I wanted to say
question.
something about the process of building the trust, which is the major challenge in the buying. The process can be slow, but I think if it is deliberately put in place by the academia, which I have seen happen here in Lagos, it may be easier to build that trust, bringing the state government with the community. Before 2015, it was difficult for such collaboration to happen. But with the contribution and facilitation from my university, we have been able to make it possible for the government and the local community to sit around the table to co-create knowledge, which is informing decision around slum upgrading and the rest. Of course, like Caroline mentioned, there are a lot of challenges associated with that because of political dynamics. But that does not mean that that process is not possible. It is possible if we put in place strategies to bring together these two individuals into the room, because that's the only way that can be possible. The other side is the buy-in, or if you like, the uptake by national statistical offices. Again, we are doing a lot in that regard through the Copenhagen framework, whereby the US Statistical Division is bringing together NGOs, civil society group, with academia, working on data collection, leverages citizen science to make every stakeholder to see the importance of citizen-generated data and to see how this data can be validated, which is usually some of the problem, and then integrated into national statistical offices to fill in a major gap in data, which is affecting planning, decision, and resilience building in the informal communities. Thank you for opportunity to speak.
Thanks, Peter. Thank you also for raising, so the Copenhagen Framework on Citizen Data is hot off the press. It was just ratified in April, and many people might know it, but it's more being applied and developed in the realm of statistics, official statistics. The idea is, how can citizen science be used to fill gaps in official statistics? But I couldn't agree more with Peter that there's a lot of relevance here in the geospatial kind of applications. So we should be really thinking about that. And if somebody is willing to find the link to the Copenhagen Framework and share it in the chat, that would be great. Okay, so into the room. Okay, 2 people. I've got one.
If you could introduce yourself when you speak.
I'm going to put someone else on the spot. I want to know you're paying attention and this is interesting enough for you. So after Ben, who's going next? Oh my goodness, guys. Okay, here we go.
Thank you very much to the presenters for really interesting presentations. My name is Sam Kay, and I wanted to ask about, this kind of connects to Peter, Dennis, and Caroline's presentations, but have any of you had any experience with a strategy that would, thinking about, Dennis, your different scalar levels, that would, using something like a community-owned and managed research framework, keep the most granular data using a tool like licensing, copyright, Peter, to your point about recognizing intellectual property, keeping that at the community level, while still allowing aggregated data to be open source and more freely shared with different entities, or even just with any entity, as a way of allowing city, regional, global scale uses of those aggregated data to move forward, while trust is very important for good data collection, but also creating some extra level of protection for against misuse of the most granular, the most sensitive data. and also creating an incentive structure for all other partners to keep communities level data partners in the picture over a longer term period.
Great set of questions. Last chance. Anyone else want to raise a point or a question? Yes, okay, we're gonna compile those and then we'll get the responses online.
Thank you so much for a wonderful presentation this morning. My name is Kazumi Homer. I have a question for Peter with regard to dilemma he mentioned. He's several research funding from the Global North to support national universities in the Global South is not really successful. So I was just wondering if Peter could elaborate a little more on how to improve this kind of support to the national level universities in order for respective countries to strengthen the capacity of research at their, the university level. Thank you.
Great, thanks. So one question for Peter, and then Sam's question was kind of for anybody. Did you have someone in mind you wanted to respond first? Caroline? Okay, great. Caroline, kick us off for Sam's question.
Okay. Sorry, I was enjoying the question. And maybe part of it is what I didn't mention in my presentation is the capacity development that we've been doing for the city departments. And this maybe might answer this question on the dilemma. That as part of the work in Idea Maps, we did train environmental officers who are at the lowest administrative level on the use of geospatial techniques. And not because they were participating in data collection, but so that they can be able to understand how to use this in their day-to-day work. And as you might hear maybe later in the afternoon with one of my colleagues, Francis, that they have been able to integrate this in their day-to-day activities. So that can help the city departments to use this data and carry it beyond the project cycle. But maybe to the earlier question about protecting communities, I think it's very important to protect communities, to protect their anonymity. A lot of the data sets that we collect have health information even at household level, and it is easy to trace back. If, for example, you have a data set I mentioned, like APHRC has collected demographic surveillance data for 20 years into slums in Nairobi. And if we were to map every household and put it online, then you could easily link these two data sets. So I think what you're doing in Idea Maps is that we are reporting at a larger scale, not at household level. It is important, even all the data sets we put up, because we do upload data sets to, for example, OpenStreetMap. We protect information that might put households or communities at risk. We recently did a survey on provision of water services, and not all of them are actually legal connections. So we try to how do you protect? I think it's still a dilemma, but how do you provide information on where the water points are without identifying to the authorities who is operating illegally if that is not our task? And of course, many times you go to the cities and you do a survey on health, for example, health facilities, and the cities are very excited by saying, oh yes, we want to know who doesn't have a license. And they're like, we cannot give you that information. And I think key to this is that I think every research being done within communities should always be about protecting the community members. I think what Dina presented earlier, that all our processes should be community-centered, that you're collecting data to improve these communities without putting them at risk, although, as I mentioned, there could be some unintended consequences. But ourselves as researchers and data collectors, we do have that responsibility to protect individuals within communities. Thank you.
I know there's a few other questions. I will encourage our speakers to just have a quick look at the Q&A section for questions that we didn't get answered online. To the last question that was posed, which is to Peter, what are those recommendations for incentivizing more equitable distribution of resources and kind of decision-making roles in this kind of research? And then that'll be our last presentation that'll be our last comment for this morning session, and we'll move into the next session. So floor is yours, Peter.
Thank you again, Dina, and for this opportunity again to say one or two things about this important aspect of balancing or addressing power imbalance in the research collaboration between the institutions in the global north and global south. I think for me, what stands out is the way the program funding programs are designed. And I've cited the example of the Leading Integrated Research Agenda 2030 for Africa. The design of that program ensure that researchers in Africa who are early career or middle career led the project. So they brought together the teams that carried out this particular research or researches across African cities. And in doing that, the resources were, of course, localized in African cities, and the trainings were given to these early career researchers who today, after 5 years of that program, have become mature researchers who are impacting and the African continent, and also transferring that capacity to other researchers within the African continent. So I think that is very important. Secondly, we can also think about building institutions in African cities. Caroline, my colleague, is from African Population and Research Health Center that is building capacity of researchers in the health, social research, health and social research across African cities. And through that, so many people have been trained, and they have been able to attract grants, because with that center, there's a lot of trust on the global north to bring money to Africa through that kind of a center. So I think that's another way, by creating more resource centers that have capacity to do impactful research across African cities. And another thing is, I don't know how this will happen, but encouraging some funding for publishing of top papers by African scholars. Many of our institutions cannot afford the kind of fees that are charged for publication. Talking about $1,000, $2,000 per article. Some of us don't end up to that as salaries per month. You know, so how do you spend a year's salary to publish just an article? So that is another thing, and also opportunity for travel to international fora where they can share their knowledge, outputs, and also learn from others. Thank you for attention.
Thank you, all of the speakers in the first session. It was really fantastic.